Hello everyone and welcome. I am sitting inside of the brand new Rolls-Royce Cullinan, and I've spent the entire day driving this SUV both on-road and off-road. This is the first SUV that Rolls-Royce has ever offered, and I was fortunate enough to spend the entire day driving with Krismer, who is the chief engineer of the Rolls-Royce Cullinan. So in riding along with her and chatting with her throughout the day, I got to learn some very unique things about this vehicle, some cool things about this vehicle. And so in this video, we're going to be going over 10 of those things that I learned, 10 things that I find kind of the most interesting about Rolls-Royce first SUV. So the first one we're going to get into is the all-wheel drive system, because this is the first Rolls-Royce to ever offer all-wheel drive. And so how have they done it? Well, it's a pretty straightforward setup. You start with the V12 engine up front, twin turbo 6.75 liter. That's sending power to the transmission, which then distributes the torque through a center coupling. So that center coupling has a nominal 50-50 split. So if you're just cruising down the highway, driving around, you've got a 50-50 torque split front-rear. From there, it goes to the front or the rear differentials, both of which are open, and then they will use the brakes to modulate. If one tire starts spinning, they'll brake that individual tire. So that's the basics of how the all-wheel drive system works, and then it varies that center clutch pack in order to vary the torque distribution from the front axle to the rear axle. There's a lot going on with this all-wheel drive system as well. So up front, you actually have two stabilizer bars, not just one, you've got two, because you've got that giant V12, so I suppose they needed to add another, and then you've got a rear stabilizer bar, and then you also have four-wheel steering. So at low speeds, you're going to actually turn those rear wheels opposite the front wheels so that it can maneuver better, and then at higher speeds, both wheels will turn together, so you get that stability at high speeds when you're changing lanes or something like that. Now, discussing the all-wheel drive system, the fact that this is an SUV, it's got all-wheel drive, it leads us to point number 2, which is that this can also go off-road. And so Rolls-Royce makes it very simple. You have one single button, you push the off-road button if you wish to go off-road, and that's going to change several things. So the first thing that happens, this has an air suspension all the way around, and so it's going to raise the vehicle up 40 millimeters, so you have some extra ground clearance off-road. You also have electronic damping all around, and so what it's going to do is actually stiffen up that damping a bit. So on the road, it's going for this very comfortable thing, whereas once you get off-road, it's going to stiffen up that damping a bit, give you a little bit better response so that the whole vehicle isn't rolling all over the place. It's got a bit more control and stays very steady. They also are going to adjust the sensitivity of the throttle pedal, so you get a bit more travel for how much torque you're getting. You can be a bit more precise with it and say, okay, I'm going up this incline and I need this much throttle, and you get a bit more control with the throttle pedal where it loses a bit of its sensitivity, so you have more travel in response to how much torque you would get. And then if you get very deep in the throttle, of course, you can get all of that power. The other thing it does is it takes that center coupling, which is distributing the torque front to rear, and it starts to apply a bit more pressure to it. So it's not going to fully lock it up, but it's going to apply a bit more pressure. And then if you put it in the off-road expert mode, which is another option, then it will actually fully lock up that center clutch, and so that allows torque to be sent completely to whichever axle has grip. Now, speaking of grip, we get to point number 3, and this is Rolls-Royce Magic Carpet Ride. So this is the suspension, what they've called it for many, many years in all of their models. This is the magic comfortable ride that a Rolls-Royce provides. And to be honest, I've driven plenty of other, well, I say plenty, I've driven the Wraith and I've driven the Dawn, and I wouldn't say that I necessarily think of it as this ultra unique thing from a suspension feeling, how it feels driving down the road. But I do feel like it does feel extremely unique in the Rolls-Royce Cullinan, and maybe it's similar to the Phantom, which I haven't yet driven, but it's pretty incredible just how kind of floaty it feels, where you don't really feel the road unless it's really rough. And when it's not very rough, it has this very gentle, just kind of floaty feel to it, which doesn't feel like floaty in a bad way, not in like you don't have control. Floaty in like it's just a very cushioned feeling of going down the road, and that's both on-road and off-road, which is pretty bizarre. It's extremely bizarre when you're kind of going down a gravel road and you don't really feel that gravel bumping you around. It's just like you're driving on a road, and it's very smooth, and that's a unique, interesting thing. And so Rolls-Royce kind of theory with the suspension, in order to have this magic carpet ride, what they call it, is to use these air struts, And then their idea with the air struts is that they have a very low spring rate. And so by having a very low spring rate, you're always going to maintain good contact with the ground and have high pressure on the ground at any one individual wheel. And so they have 110 millimeters of travel for each of these wheels. And as a result, you maintain that contact with the ground and you maintain grip because that spring is so soft. And so this gives you that comfortable ride, and then paired with the electronic damping where they can vary the stiffness of the damping, they can kind of sort out those vibrations so it remains very cushioned. The other thing about what makes this work is that this has an extremely stiff body underneath. So it's unique to the Cullinan. It's somewhat similar of a platform with the Phantom, but there's a uniqueness to them where there's modular areas of this platform that they can change out specific to the Cullinan versus specific to the Phantom. And so they have this very rigid body, this very rigid shell, and so because you have that perfectly rigid shell, you can fine-tune things very well with the air suspension, getting that really soft spring rate and then pairing that with the electronic damping in order to have this really weirdly cushiony, it was strange going uphill, up this mountain in this thing, off-road, and it just feeling very floaty, not like this rough experience that is usually associated with going off-road. So it has the whole like Rolls-Royce on-road feel, but even when you're off-road, and that's pretty bizarre and very cool. Number 4 is the sound deadening, and I'm particularly happy that it has good sound deadening in here because it seems like every time I try to film a press car, it is raining, and so it's raining now, and thankfully it's not that loud in here from the raindrops that I can still have this conversation with you guys and talk about this car without the overwhelming sound of rain hitting the vehicle. So what's going on with the sound? Well, they have over 100 kilograms of sound deadening throughout this vehicle just to eliminate noises, keep it quiet, keep it rattle free in here. The glass itself is a layer of 3mm glass, then an acoustic foil, and then another 3mm layer of glass. So over 6mm, these glass windshields around. And so, versus a normal car, you're typically going to have about 3 to 4mm total of glass, and then that's your window. And so they've got, basically double a normal car window around you, plus that acoustic layer in between, in order to make sure it's very quiet in here. And it is wildly quiet, like just going around on the highway, even going off-road, it is pretty incredible how quiet it remains in here. And I think that's one of the things that kind of, once you lose that distraction of tire noise, of road noise, things like that, then you start to pay attention to other things like the suspension and how rough is it. And that's where it kind of gets this kind of eerie, weird feeling because you don't hear a whole lot. And then because of the suspension being tuned well, I mean, you've got this 6,000 pound mass. This thing is certainly a tank. And so the small vibrations to 6,000 pounds, it's nothing. So they all get absorbed by those tires very easily and you don't feel a thing. So it's a weird combination when you have it very quiet inside and then, very smooth riding. It's a pretty special thing, and it's the first Rolls-Royce that I've been in and thought, this is actually like super special the way this feels just driving down the road or a gravel road from a like quiet, comfortable, just tranquil experience. Very neat. Now, speaking of road noise, we get to the tires, and these tires are specifically developed. They're all-season tires developed specifically for the Cullinan, so that it can go on-road, off-road, have capability. And I was asking the chief engineer, what's the thing that you prioritize with these tires? Because, manufacturers will often team up with a tire manufacturer and say, these are the things we want to do, and they will tweak it specifically for the vehicle. So this has 22-inch wheels, massive wheels. They want to still incorporate comfort. And so I was asking the chief engineer, what's the thing that you are most concerned about with these tires? And it wasn't grip. Instead, it was actually the rolling comfort and the noise level. So those were the two things that were prioritized, was rolling comfort. So making sure it was a good, like from a suspension standpoint, that it gave you a nice, comfortable ride and that it wasn't loud. And one of the interesting things that they do with these tires, the front tires are actually filled with foam, and that's to reduce that rolling noise as they are traveling down the road. So you have a really low amount of noise from the tires, which is weird. You can roll your window down, hear the tire noise, roll your window up, and then it kind of disappears. So it's pretty neat how well they've insulated this interior from the tires, from that tire noise, and how they've designed the tires themselves to not produce all that much noise. Number 6, we're going to talk about the rear seats. And so these rear seats are electronically folding, and it's actually pretty cool because there's two things that are pretty unique about these. First of all, the floor height is actually adjustable, so you can have it match up and become flush with the seats that have folded down, or you can have it fold flat so that the rear cargo area is completely flat. And then the other thing that's neat about this is when you fold those rear seats down, they actually adjust the headrest up electronically to make sure that it can fold completely down. So if you had that headrest down, well, then it's going to run into the cushion as it's on its way down. So it will extend that headrest out the exact amount needed so that chair can fold down all the way, and then you've got that nice section there to put back there, whatever you need to put back there. Number 7 is pretty fascinating, and it is thin door sills. And you're thinking, what? Why is that so special? So I was asking Caroline, the chief engineer, what's something about this vehicle that people will get in, never know that that is a thing that exists, that you're proud of doing, and yet, they appreciate it without actually knowing that they're appreciating it. And the first thing that kind of popped out into her head and she started talking about was these thin door sills. And so basically what it is if you open up these rear doors and then you come and sit in the vehicle, the door sill itself is very narrow. And on many cars, this is often a lot wider. And when it's wider, it means you have to move your leg out more, and then your leg ends up rubbing up against the side of the car, and then you get your pants dirty, things that people who are buying a $400,000 SUV don't want to have happen to them. And so because the Cullinan has its own unique architecture, she was saying the struggle with many manufacturers of why they all don't have these very thin sills is that they have common architectures. So some vehicles will have that wide door sill, and then as a result, all of the vehicles in that platform are kind of forced into it. But because the Cullinan has its unique platform that it's based on, its own unique architecture, they were able to still have, the strength needed, but a very thin door sill so that when you're stepping out, your leg isn't a very far distance from stepping out onto the ground, and you don't have this wide door sill that you have to rub up against. And also with this, they make sure that the floor is entirely flat. And so from, where you enter the vehicle to across to where you're sitting, it's completely flat. It's a flat area. You don't have different height. You don't step down into the car. You don't step up into the car. It's just this flat level that you get in, and it's at one height. And so it's another unique touch where they're trying to maximize how easy ingress and egress is, and it's something that you necessarily won't, see just looking at the car, getting in and out. Think about something that you won't necessarily appreciate that so much thought has gone into, and yet it has. So it's kind of a cool little clever thing that she was very proud of, that I was excited to kind of learn about, simply because it's something she thinks, most people won't truly see or appreciate, but they'll know that they do like the fact that it's easy to get in and out. Number 8 is another one that's kind of weird and out there, but it's pretty cool, and this is the side frame finishing. And so Rolls-Royce says that this side frame finishing is the longest continuous piece in automotive history. And so it stretches all the way from that front A-pillar all the way to the back and then wraps around. And apparently this is a very challenging thing to do, from a supplier standpoint, getting someone to make this the right way, having all the lines line up with all the different body panels and making it still work. Unique clipping that has to go into this. They say it's a challenge for it, not to go all the way across. It's easy to go across, but then once you start coming back, that becomes a challenge. Another unique thing about this is the polishing that's involved. And so there's different polishing, whether it's thin or whether it's wide. So in the thinner areas, if you polish it really well and it becomes a mirror, it makes it actually look a bit thinner. And so they want it to not be polished quite as perfectly on the thinner areas, so it appears to be a bit wider. And then with the wide areas, you want that nice perfect polish of the chrome, that single chrome piece. You want it nicely polished there, so you have this good reflection, looking at that wide strip. But it's all about, changing these individual details, having less polishing on the top than on the sides, having it wrap around this single continuous piece. Another thing that I think you'll just look at, never think anything twice of, but then learning kind of, behind the scenes what was going on, thinking that went into it, is actually pretty neat. Number 9 is the Coachline. So this is a single painted stripe across the side of the car, And what's fascinating about this is that for over the past 15 plus years, this has been the same guy, one dude working at the Rolls-Royce factory, and he is purely responsible for this single line. And so it's an art. It's a single stroke all the way across, and it's very cool that it's just one person hand painting it, that single line all the way across the side of the car. And it's perfect when you look at it as far as the straightness of it. So it's a detail that's pretty unbelievable once you go, wait, one guy just painted this across, and any Rolls-Royce model out there that you see with that painted line across that's been built in the past 15 or so years, it's all been painted by this one exact same guy. So a neat little detail that's included on the exterior there, that simple line of paint, but it's hand drawn on all of these. So very cool. And finally, we get to number 10 just in time. The rain has stopped, and we will of course be talking about the umbrella. So of course we are. The umbrella is very cool. It's always in the Rolls-Royce, built into the door. But there's some neat things about this. First of all, there's a unique spring pressure that they choose to make sure that that handle ejects all the way out. You can grip it fully with your hand, and then, cover the person that's about to come out. The other thing is, once this umbrella is wet and you place it back in there, they actually have the HVAC system hooked up to that area where the umbrella lies so that it dries out the umbrella as you're driving around, so that it's dry for the next time that you use it. Pretty clever that they've got the HVAC going through there and drying the umbrella as you're driving around. On top of this, for the Cullinan, they actually had to shorten the length of the umbrella, so it's a bit shorter than their usual one that they use in the Phantom, because of the door length where they've placed it. And of course, they match the color of the umbrella to the bespoke interior color. So you've got your unique choice of colors out there, and they will match your umbrella with the interior. And another cool thing about this umbrella, unbelievable that there's so many cool things about an umbrella, but there are. It has this simple release mechanism, and yet it needs to be very secure, in the event you're in an accident or anything like that. So they have a simple release mechanism that they've built into it, that ejects it very easily, but also that keeps that umbrella exactly where it is. You don't have to worry about an umbrella going somewhere it shouldn't be during an accident. So those are 10 features which I found pretty fascinating about the Rolls-Royce Cullinan. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, of course, feel free to leave those below.